All right, folks, welcome to Roland Martin Unfiltered. On today's show, we'll talk about the Botham Jean killing in Dallas. 6 people have now come forward to say they heard the police officer who murdered him say, "Let me in." And that's not what you say, of course, when you're at your own apartment. We'll talk with Dallas pastor Dr. Freddie Haynes, of course, Friendship West Baptist Church, and also National Action Network. In Chicago, the murder trial of the cop who killed Laquan McDonald began today. We'll have a live report from Chicago. Also, the average black household income is virtually unchanged from 15 years ago, while white income is up to record levels. We'll talk with Howard University economist Bill Spriggs to break it all down. Also, last week, the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation's annual legislative weekend concluded on Saturday with a rousing speech from the Reverend Dr. William Barber of the Poor People's Campaign. You must check out what he had to say. And also, a black conservative columnist for the right-wing website, The Daily Caller, thinks Colin Kaepernick hasn't really sacrificed much. Wait until I school him right here on Roland Martin Unfiltered. And also remember, Oscars so white, well, maybe we can say paint the Emmys black. We'll talk with Eric Deggans, a TV critic for NPR, about the Emmys and how they are doing so much better when it comes to people of color. And of course, all the folks at, this school could be very happy. I'm rocking their shirt today. Of course, I'll tell you who our HBCU Giving Day University is. Ain't hard to figure out. It's time to bring the funk on Roland Martin Unfiltered. Let's go.
He's got it. Whatever the miss, he's on it. Whatever it is, he's got the scoop, the fact, the find. And when it breaks, he's right on time and it's rolling. Best believe he's knowing. Putting it down from sports to news to politics. With entertainment just for kicks, he's rolling. It's on roll, y'all. It's Roland Martin, yeah. Rolling with Roland now. He's funk, he's fresh, he's real, the best, you know he's Roland Martin now. Martin.
Folks, over the weekend in Dallas, protesters, they were at Cowboy Stadium in Arlington with coffins to bring attention to the death of Botham Jean. Of course, he is the man who was shot and killed by Amber Geiger in his own apartment. You see the video there. 9 protesters were arrested as a result. And so, again, they were carrying coffins for all the folks who were going to the game there where they played the New York Giants to show them that this story deserves to have national attention. Of course, Geiger has said that she entered the wrong apartment and opened the door. She said she ordered him to show his hands and then she fired. But that story has changed left and right. We now know, according to the family attorneys, that no less than 6 people have said they heard her say, "Let me in," while knocking on the door. That's what's going on there. Now, of course, also, Dallas Police Department, they've been nailed over the weekend when they released the evidence report of what was captured inside of the apartment of Geiger, the police officer, as well as Jean. Well, the problem is we don't know what was in her apartment, but they released what was in his apartment, which including a small amount of marijuana. Yeah, we know this game. We've seen it before. Joining us right now from Dallas is Dr. Freddie Haynes. He's the pastor of Friendship West Baptist Church, also with the National Action Network. Pastor Haynes, glad to have you here on Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Thank you, Roro, and thank you for giving us a voice, man. Having you back on air is a gift.
Well, I appreciate it, sir. Let's get right to it. You've been one of the pastors there protesting what's happening there. Of course, Dallas has a black police chief, a black district attorney, but it seems as if the police are doing all they can to protect Amber Geiger. When she shot and killed Jean, she was not on duty. It took them 3 days for an arrest to actually be made, and to have all these conflicting stories, and now we have them releasing the evidence report saying there was a small amount of marijuana in his apartment.
Right. And 3 days to arrest her, that meant 3 days to plant evidence if they wanted to in order to tarnish their reputation. 3 days to whitewash Amber Geiger, social media, as well as reputation. Amber Geiger has moved now, and so what we're noticing is that there is preferential treatment being given to this police officer killed this young African American male. Not only that, Roland, really, Jack, it's last Thursday, as you well know, they had the nerve while the funeral was going on. The mother, the family, they are engaged in the homegoing celebration, and then they decide they're going to lynch the reputation of this young man by releasing this report. And again, we know how it goes. We've seen this movie before, saying marijuana was found in his apartment, somehow using that to again begin the process of lynching his reputation. And so you mentioned the fact we do have a black DA, we do have a black police chief, but we also know that black faces in the same places that are not changed will not result in change. And so that's why we are challenging the police chief, we are challenging the DA, and because it does not matter what your color is if you are not engaged in transforming the system that you are giving leadership to. Because in a real sense, what has happened under this black police chief is the same thing that would happen under a white police chief. And that's why yesterday at the protest, we called for the police department and the police chief to hold accountable those individuals who released that information about Botham Jean. We called for that. We called for the DA to push for murder. If you can indict a ham sandwich, they say, we want you to insist that this woman be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law and be charged with murder. Because we all know if it had been reversed and Botham Jean had entered her apartment, shot her with that same lie and excuse, he'd be charged for capital murder. He'd be under the jail, and it would have happened on that day. We're saying to the black police chief and to the black DA, we do not want the same movie played, and we're going to protest until you get it right.
Also, we know that Amber Geiger has moved out of that apartment. She's now living elsewhere. And again, she's free, and we still are asking these questions, trying to understand what the heck happened.
Right. And again, she's being protected. And as far as I'm concerned, preferential treatment means that no justice is taking place. And that's why yesterday I was so proud of the faith leaders who joined me out at Jerry's World in order to take a stand and make a statement. Because again, this woman is being protected. We are not seeing the same kind of due process that would take place had the roles been reversed. And that is not justice.
I got to ask you this here as well. I'm trying to pull the story up where Ted Cruz, Senator Ted Cruz of Texas, made this unbelievable comment with regards to this case where he essentially said, look, he criticized Beto O'Rourke for saying she should be fired. He said we should wait for more information, and then said this could have been a misunderstanding and we shouldn't destroy two lives. Last I checked, Botham Jean is dead. Amber Geiger is still living. And it's amazing to have for Ted Cruz to act as if that, well, her potentially losing her job or going to jail is having her life destroyed. No, this 26-year-old brother is dead.
Right. Right. And again, Ted Cruz does not have a whole lot of credibility in the black community. He does not have credibility. I guess we can say about him what his new friend Donald Trump said about him during the campaign, lying Ted. Because again, we're talking about a young man who is dead, a family where there's a mother who no longer has a son who is living. There are family members who don't have a brother. He is dead, and this woman is being protected. And so to talk about waiting while she's already lied, we waited for 3 days for her to get arrested, so we ain't waiting no more. And as far as I'm concerned, Ted Cruz has nothing to say about this that we would respect, because he's never, ever in this community taking a stand for justice and taking a stand against black bodies being slain by police officers. So Ted Cruz, you ain't got no credibility here.
And here, if you go to my iPad, this is some video from the Facebook page of Good Street Baptist Church. This is where Beto O'Rourke was this weekend, where he made that particular comment afterwards. He said there's no other way you can come to another conclusion that she should be fired. And so that's what Ted Cruz has criticized, saying that how could he even say that? Of course, Good Street Baptist Church a very prominent black church there in Dallas. And so this is video from their Facebook page of him being there. And again, this is leadership. This is Beto O'Rourke coming out saying that, look, even if you take just where we are right now, she's admitted going to the wrong apartment. She's admitted killing a guy. I don't understand how else wouldn't you keep somebody on the force who shoots and kills a man in his own apartment.
Right. And again, that's what we called for yesterday. We had a memorial protest at Jerry's World. And one of the things we said is we are calling right now for the immediate firing of Amber Guyger. I've been told by the mayor and others that there's a process they have to go through in order for the firing to take place. And I'm just saying, well, let's expedite that process. She deserves to be fired. We know she's lying about going to the wrong apartment. We already know that she went there and she killed this man. We already know that she also was involved in a police shooting last year. And so we need to have these early detection systems in place when persons who are dangerous, and she was already dangerous. She did not have the right to have a gun, let alone be working those kind of hours. And so as far as I'm concerned, to defend Amber Guyger lets us know what side of history you are on, and it's the wrong side of history.
And the last thing I'm going to ask you, I'm going to go back to the Dallas Morning News website. Here we go to my iPad. Here's a story here. Former cop Roy Oliver begins 15-year prison sentence for murdering Jordan Edwards. That, of course, took place in Balk Springs. He was sentenced again. He was convicted of murdering this 15-year-old. Again, lied about them trying to drive the car at him. The body cam showed something else. This is a perfect example of a police officer who was convicted of murdering an African-American, and he reported he was handed over today to folks with the Texas Department of Corrections to serve that 15-year sentence. Again, just your thoughts on that particular case. We have an example of a cop who was who was convicted of murder there in the Dallas area.
And an example of a cop who, at the beginning of the investigation, lied and said that Jordan Edwards was in a car and he felt that his life was threatened because the car was backing into him, when, of course, the video revealed that they were pulling away. And so he got caught in his lie. And as a consequence, now he is serving a sentence. As far as I'm concerned, I'm glad that he was convicted of murder. That's exactly what he deserved. I am disappointed in the time he's going to serve because Jordan Edwards, again, didn't get to see his 16th or 17th birthday. And this man is going to serve, maybe they say 15 years. We all know that that's going to probably come out to be 7.5, maybe 8 years. So as far as I'm concerned, that's very disappointing. But it is a step in the right direction of the long journey toward justice. But as I'm telling the DA right here in Dallas, we're not going to tokenize this just because a football team is 1-15 and they won the last game. That doesn't mean you had a winning season. It just means you won the last game.
Reverend Dr. Freddie Haynes, I appreciate it. Thank you so very much.
Thanks. Keep repping them HBCUs.
I got you. Well, I'm sure the folks in St. Louis are real happy wearing the shirt today. Thanks a bunch.
Hey,
All right. Of course, Freddie Haynes being my alpha brother. Let's turn to Chicago, folks, where the trial of Chicago police officer Jason Van Dyke started today. And again, actually day 7, but just some pre-trial motions taking place with the prosecution calling their first witnesses. You remember, it was 4 years ago, when Van Dyke shot and killed Laquan McDonald, shot him 16 times in just 6 seconds after Van Dyke exited the car. He lied, of course, by saying that Laquan McDonald was running away from them, when in fact we saw this video. And the only reason this video was released was because of massive protests against the city of Chicago. In the courtroom today, the special prosecutor, Joseph McMahon, played the police video of Laquan McDonald being shot for the jury. Now, just before, he listed all 16 shots that hit McDonald and told the jury that Van Dyke attempted to reload his gun when his partner stopped him and said, quote, "We got this." Joining me right now to talk about the case is Kathy Cheney. She's the assistant audience engagement editor for the Chicago Sun-Times. Kathy, this particular story, again, got lots of attention, led to Anita Alvarez losing her job as Cook County State's prosecutor because of their failure to go after Van Dyke. And the citizens had to fight to get that dash cam video released. Kathy, can you hear me?
I can't hear you if you're saying something.
Kathy, can you hear me now? All right. So again, we saw Anita Alvarez lose her job over this. We also saw what taking place in terms of Kim Foxx winning. And so what we have here is now this trial is going forward because of the public pressure put on by citizens.
Absolutely. And the demonstrators couldn't be more proud that they have gotten Anita Alvarez out. Kim Foxx is in. So they've been waiting on this day to come. But now that it's here, they're cautiously optimistic that, justice will be served. You've got to look at the makeup of the jury, which there's only one African American. There are, I believe, 2 or 3 Hispanics. And one of those Hispanics, she's an applicant to be a CPD officer. I think you have 1 Asian and the rest are white. So cautiously optimistic that the jury will do what they want them to do, which is to convict Van Dyke.
Well, and again, so you have the prosecutors going after Van Dyke here, and first of all, are they going after him for murder or is it manslaughter?
These counts of first-degree murder, then there are like some counts of some other charge, and so people are saying, well, how can he be charged so many times for just one murder? And there are different legal theories under each count. So he's definitely charged with murder, first-degree murder.
Give us a scene. What is it like outside of the courtroom? Are there observers? Are there protesters?
I can't hear you if you're saying something.
Okay, folks. So, Kathy, if you can hear me, are there observers and protesters outside of the courtroom?
Oh, absolutely. There are protesters every morning when Van Dyke walks in. So there are protesters out on the street. They're doing their chants. There are some that have been authorized to go into the courtroom. Of course, you have to, maintain the decorum of the courtroom rules, but there are observers and protesters that are inside and outside.
All right, then. And so, Kathy, we certainly appreciate that. We'll be watching this case as it twists and turns every single day. So we appreciate it. Thanks a bunch.
Thank you.
All right. Folks, over the weekend, the CBCF, of course, they had their AOC, the annual conference that takes place, where various policy summits, various think tanks take place. Of course, we were broadcasting live from there on Wednesday and Thursday as well. Saturday night was the Phoenix Awards, where they honored a number of people, including Tommie Smith. This is the 50th anniversary of the protest at the Mexico City Olympics. Also, Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr. and his wife Jacqueline Jackson were also one of the honorees, as well as, of course, Brian Stevenson. So there were a number of people who were honored. But the keynote speaker that night was, of course, Reverend Dr. William J. Barber, who's leading the Poor People's Campaign. And so here's some of his particular speech. We've been live streaming it all weekend. I want to be able to show you some of what he had to say, where he challenged the folks in their tuxedos to stand up and fight against the evil in the Oval Office.
I want to talk for a moment about knowing who we are in times like these. And there is a text, since I'm a preacher, and I hope you don't mind if I lift one verse. It's in Hebrews chapter 10, verse 39. It says, "We do not belong to those who shrink back unto destruction, but we are among those who have faith and who work for the perseverance of the soul." We do not belong to those who shrink back. I come tonight to this Congressional Black Caucus because I know a little something, Brother Roland, about this caucus and the strivings. I know about Hiram Rebels before there ever was a caucus out of Mississippi, who replaced that treasonous terrorist, Jefferson Davis, the former president of the Confederacy. I know about George White from North Carolina, who gave the last speech of the last congressperson elected during Reconstruction in 1902, and he gave that Phoenix speech and said, like the Phoenix, we will rise from the ashes again. But I also know that the founders of the Congressional Caucus They said in 71, it started out as a Democratic Select Committee. But in 71, they said that the caucus was not born to promote a party, but to be the conscience of the Congress, and to ever remind Republicans and Democrats of the need to strive for a more perfect union. You know who they were, don't you? Shirley Chisholm was the single woman in that midst, but oh, she was powerful. And Clay and Collins and Diggs and Hawkins and Metcalf and Conyers and Mitchell and Nix and Stokes and Rangel and Dellums and Fauntroy. They were the founders. And upon forming, they said this: the purpose of this Congressional Black Caucus is to seize the moment, to fight for justice, and to raise the issues that are barely debated. Because they knew in order to deal with America, they had to know who they were. They also knew that they sat in those seats because those seats had been baptized in blood. Today, as we are here, this is the 55th anniversary of the killing, the murder, the domestic terrorism of those 4 little girls in a Birmingham church. But I want to remind every political elected official and everybody that holds an office, what we do has been baptized in blood. So we are here, my sisters and brothers, to cry out on behalf of those who've not yet been heard. We are here not to shrink back, but to hold on to the hope that America yet may become what she has long promised to be: one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And that's why I raised this text today. That's why I want to talk about we are not of those who shrink back unto destruction. You know, Paul was a black brother. I hope y'all know that. And he wrote this. He was a brother. He was a brother. And Paul, when he wrote these words, the Jesus movement was under assault by a malignant narcissist, political leader in Rome. And that malignant leader, narcissist leader, had a bunch of enablers. And they were trying to turn everything back in America, in Rome. And Paul said to the movement, because there were people in the movement who were thinking about going along to get along. And Paul said, we are not of those who shrink back unto destruction, but we are those who persevere unto the salvation of the soul. In other words, you better know who you are when somebody is assaulting everything you believe in. The truth of the matter is, properly defining yourself and who you are is a critical philosophical theological discipline that has penetrating and practical implication, particularly when one is under crisis. When you're under threat, the most important thing is not what your enemy does, but do you know who you are and whose you are and why you're really being threatened. Knowing who you are is critical to your sanity and your ability to sustain a fight back when you are facing what Paul Tillich called the very threat of non-being and non-existence. Now, to be sure, my brothers and sisters, we've always had to fight to maintain a proper sense of self because America has always struggled with who she is. America, this American project, has always had a kind of split personality, at times political and social schizophrenia, a great gulf between what America says she dreams to be and what she is in reality. That's why even in her great hymns, one of them says, America, America, God mend thine every flaw. Even the hymn writer knew that America can be schizophrenic at times. Dr. King once critiqued this nation and said, let us be dissatisfied until America will no longer have a high blood pressure of creeds and an anemia of deeds. And then it wasn't Langston Hughes that said, America, oh, America has never been America to me, but I swear this oath that America will be. In America, there has been progress, but this has only come when we who knew when those who knew who they were and who America should be dared to challenge this country and not to give up on her possibility.
All right, folks, be sure to go to our YouTube channel, of course, youtube.com/Roland S. Martin. You can actually see the full speech of Reverend Barber. We also have it on our Facebook and Periscope pages as well. All right, so you see me wearing, of course, the Harris-Stowe University shirt. They are our HBCU Giving Day School of the Day. And so, roll it. You'll see the graphic there, of course. This is one of the schools that I've actually spoken at. And so here's the deal. So you see it right here. This is how we put together our graphic. And so, of course, Harris-Stowe State University, you can, if you want to give to them, go to www.hssu.edu. Like I say, I've spoken there a couple of times. And so here's the deal, just like when I used to wear the lapel pins. And so I probably spoke at almost 50 HBCUs. And so if I spoke at your university, then I'll be rocking your gear. Now, if I ain't spoken at your university, y'all ain't gonna get that. So you know, some people gonna be a little bit upset. Bill Spriggs thought I was gonna be wearing a Howard today. I was that close to grabbing the Howard University shirt, but I decided to go ahead and give Harris-Stowe some love. And so shout out to the folks at Harris-Stowe University. And so y'all keep watching the show to see if your HBCU will be represented right here on Roland Martin Unfiltered. All right, folks, you might have seen. First of all, we've been talking about Colin Kaepernick, the Nike commercial. You saw it, of course, a couple of weeks ago. In fact, yesterday, two of the players still are protesting. Actually, several other players are protesting. Kenny Stills is one of those with the Miami Dolphins. And you still got some people who are just stuck on stupid. And so now we got, of course, and you know Mississippi always stuck on stupid. They got to do something dumb. So the Mississippi Public Safety Commissioner, Marshall Fisher, says the state police of Mississippi will no longer buy Nike products because Nike is unpatriotic and fails to support those in uniform. Now, we all know that's a damn lie. But then again, really, Mississippi? It's not like y'all have a history of supporting black people, especially the state police in Mississippi. But it's no shock they would have this sort of nonsense when it comes to their rationale for why they don't want to support what's going on. And that's the case. And so I saw this other column in the Daily Caller, and I said, you know what? And so it was a very interesting piece. So Chris Arps wrote this column for the Daily Caller in which he asked the question, what has Colin Kaepernick really sacrificed? He's playing on the cap quote in the Nike ad, believe in something, even if it means sacrificing everything. And so clearly, I think Chris obviously is not aware of what's been going on. So I said, well, let's have him on the show. So Chris Arps joins us right now. So, Chris, are you there?
Mr. Martin, yes, sir.
All right. So you say that Colin Kaepernick you're unsure of what he's sacrificing. Have you been keeping up? You know he's not in the NFL. He's being whiteballed by the owners. No team will sign him. And he also has a collusion case going against him, which the mediator has actually said it can advance to the next phase of going to trial. You do know that, right?
I do know that. I know a lot of times when you make comparisons between sports figures like Muhammad Ali and the protests that took place in Mexico, I think those were entirely different. Muhammad Ali lost years of his career. The sprinters in the Mexico Olympics lost parts of their career. I think with Colin Kaepernick, what you see with this situation, he may have lost out on a few years of his football career, and we don't know, his career may still continue, but he has still been being paid by Nike, and he has gotten a very large campaign for this new Nike campaign where he's going to be doing quite well. So
okay, hold on. So do you know
what has he sacrificed?
Do you know how much the Nike contract is?
No, I don't.
Okay, so how do you know it even compares to an NFL contract? Because the last NFL contract he had,
it's not a question. I'm sure it's much more than what both you and I both make.
No, but that's actually
it's not like
hold up.
Penny.
But Chris, that's actually irrelevant because his last NFL contract was $12 million guaranteed. And so again, but for you to say I don't know,
another contract, didn't he? And he turned it down.
No,
from
actually,
a couple of teams.
No, actually, you're wrong. So what actually happened?
Okay.
No, you're wrong. What happened there was No. Let me help you. The Denver Broncos wanted to trade for Colin Kaepernick. John Elway said, if you do the trade, we will cut your salary in half, and then the rest of the money can be in incentives. He had $12 million guaranteed from the 49ers. I don't know anybody with a right mind who would turn down $12 million guaranteed to take half of the salary and get the other half of incentives. That's just crazy economics. That's actually what happened. All the other stories that you've seen where teams supposedly offered them contracts, not one team has verified any of those stories. In fact, the Daily Caller, the site you wrote this column for, actually wrote a BS story saying a team wanted to sign him. What they wrote was a lie, and there was nothing to even verify it.
Okay.
That's
Your
a fact.
point?
My point is,
Okay.
my point is, the facts are wrong. Your facts are wrong, and so he is being whiteballed by the NFL. And so when you look at some of the players who've been signed to play quarterback, some absolute scrubs, and you look at his numbers by any basic measure, any understanding of football, he should be signed by one of the 32 teams in the NFL. And so
I think it's more. I think it's more than that, Mr. Martin.
What
think
is it?
part of the reason. I think part of the reason that he's not being signed is because teams don't want the publicity of what he brings, the bad publicity.
So
you're going to have half. Wait a minute, Mr.
Go ahead.
Martin.
No, go
please.
ahead.
You're going to have half of the fans in the stadium that are going to be rooting for him and the team, and you're going to have the other half, if they show up to the stadium, not rooting for him. So I think it was the same thing when here in the Rams, Michael Sam, the gay player, no team wanted him. Part of it was because he wasn't good enough being in the NFL, but a lot of it, the team didn't want the distraction that it brought. I think that's legit.
So do you believe it's okay for NFL teams to sign rapists and wife beaters and folks who've actually been tried for murder or who have actually been involved in felony cases? Like, for instance, the Seattle Seahawks, the Cleveland Browns cut a player who pled guilty to insider trading, who was facing 25 years in prison, but they signed him to a contract. The Seattle Seahawks did. So are you saying
my overall point, Mr. Martin, is that these are NFL teams that are owned by private owners, and that if they decide that they want to hire a player or not hire a player, that's their prerogative.
Do you believe, Chris, do you believe that an NFL team should hire somebody who has raped somebody or who has sexually assaulted or beaten a woman? Do you believe that it is okay for a team to hire them over Colin Kaepernick, who is protesting police brutality?
I think if that team wants to hire that particular player, that's not my business.
No, but no. I'm asking you your opinion because according to Chris,
Chris, on a team, the part of my piece was talking about where I felt that I don't have a problem with him protesting per se. What my problem is, I don't want to see it on my national TV while I'm paying tickets to go to a stadium to watch it.
I'm sorry, Chris.
Do it on your own time.
Chris, he actually is.
There's not a job in America where I could stand up in the middle of the cafeteria or outside my employer and start protesting, especially when I'm on my employer's time.
Chris, here's the reality. Chris, you're wrong. Okay, first of all, let's just be honest. Most networks, Chris, let me help you out. First of all, when you say watching on television, most networks don't even show the national anthem. They don't even show it. So you don't even see somebody.
That's not what I'm talking about, Martin.
No, Chris, you said Chris, let me walk you back. You said I don't want to see that on my television.
Okay,
like for instance, ESPN.
I don't want to see the kneeling on my television.
So you got a problem with him kneeling. So if he was sitting, is that okay?
I'm saying if you're going to do any protest that you feel against police brutality or any protest, that you should do it on your own time.
So Chris, when the NFL teams trot police officers out there for Police Appreciation Day, what does that tell you to black people? Like, for instance, in Cleveland, if you're black in Cleveland and you're mad about Tamir Rice being shot and killed by cops there, do you want to see that? Because, I mean, tell me the difference, please, because we know this is the case.
The difference is this, and what I've said many times, is that these NFL teams are owned by these particular owners, and that I don't live in Cleveland, but if the fans in Cleveland have a problem with them trotting out police officers, then they should do some type of action on that.
Oh, so you're saying the fans can protest, but the players can't?
With players on their employer's time and at their employer's premises protesting.
But
I
you're
just
but
have a
you're not an
problem.
owner. But you're not an owner, so who cares? You're not an
I know,
owner.
but I'm an owner, but I watch television and
So
I
who
love
cares? So
football.
you watch
I don't
TV.
want to,
Whoop-de-doo.
and I don't want to, and we don't want to see people disrespecting the flag
Hold
by
up.
knee.
But see, that's
It's
where
unintentional.
that's where you're wrong.
Even
When
if
you
it's
when you begin to say they're not disrespecting the flag. In fact, the Supreme Court has affirmed that if somebody even wants to burn a flag, that's allowed because of the First Amendment. So here's what I don't understand. I don't understand
You don't have
how
a First
Chris,
Amendment right, Richard.
I got a question for you. Here's what I don't understand.
No.
I don't understand how conservatives love to
Yes.
go the Constitution, the Founding Fathers, the Constitution, when the First Amendment, not the Second, or the Third, or the Fourth, or the 48th, but the first allows for protest. So you mad?
Martin?
So you're mad that an American is exercising the right as an American to protest?
Martin,
Really?
a few years ago, I used to be a supervisor at United Parcel Service around when the Malcolm X movie came out. And when I was a supervisor, if an employee didn't show up, I would have to work. So I'd either put on a brown UPS shirt or I would put on a T-shirt. Well, I put on a Malcolm X T-shirt with a big giant X on the front of it. And after about 45 minutes, management called me into the office and said, "You cannot wear that T-shirt anymore. We don't want that." I complied because I was on my job and I was on their time.
Hold on,
It's the same-
wait, hold on. What,
With
hold
the
up.
NFL.
Was there a rule at your company that said you cannot wear that shirt?
It's not that particular shirt, Mr. Martin, but it said if you wore anything offensive that they considered offensive or it caused some type of controversy, you couldn't wear it.
Okay, hold up. So stay right there. Is there
Okay.
a rule anywhere in the NFL manual that says a player cannot take a knee during the national anthem?
No, there is not a rule.
So, hold
but-
up. So let me get this straight. In your example, you wore a shirt that was against the rules of your workplace, and you complied because you were violating the rules, correct?
I was violating the rules because that was the business atmosphere.
No.
that they had. At the
You
football
said that was, no,
stadium
hold on,
with
wait.
them
Chris,
and you're-
let's follow this. Hold on, Chris. I want to establish a base of facts. You said that was a rule. You couldn't wear the shirt, right?
Is this the opening here where you feel that you've got me? Just
No,
continue.
no,
Let's go.
no, Chris.
Just continue.
Chris, I want to establish that
continue.
you and I are on the same page.
Just continue.
That was a rule at your workplace saying
Okay.
if you had a shirt deemed offensive, you couldn't wear it, correct?
Yeah.
But over
The
here,
NFL has come up with a rule.
no,
late
no,
and said that-
there is no rule that says a player can't take a knee. In fact, if you remember, Chris, he was actually sitting down on the bench. It was a veteran, a former SEAL, Nate Boyer, who said, "That's actually disrespectful. I prefer you should take a knee." And in fact, Boyer stood behind Colin Kaepernick with his hand on his shoulder while he kneeled. Somebody who was a veteran who said that's more respectful. So you're saying that if that was a rule, then you abide by it. There's no rule, so how is Colin Kaepernick in the wrong?
They suggest, but Mr. Martin, they suggest. No, everyone knows that if you're kneeling during the flag or whatever, that's going to upset people.
Well, hold
And
on, wait
because it
a minute.
because it
Wait a
started
minute. He
upsetting
sat
people
on the
that they
bench
didn't
and
want
nobody
them to
even
kneel
knew. He
anymore,
sat on the
and they
bench.
came up with the rule. The rule really doesn't matter if it was made before or retroactive.
Actually, hold up. Chris,
it
you're wrong
doesn't- it
again.
doesn't-
The
it doesn't
rule has
matter
been
if it's
suspended because they couldn't agree with the players' union. Right now, there is no rule. Did you also know that prior to 2009, all the military stuff and the anthem, that wasn't even part of it, that the military paid the NFL for patriotism?
Now, I've heard that talking point. That's
No.
really relevant to our
It's not a talking point. It's an
point is
undeniable
these are
fact.
Private business, and you cannot protest whether there's
Hold
a
up.
rule that
They're
was
private
before
businesses?
or after. If your private employer says,
You-
"I don't want you to do this," you can't.
Actually,
Period. You're on your employer's time.
but you're actually wrong because there's a thing called the NFL and the NFL Players Association. There's a thing called collective bargaining. And so if you have not negotiated that, there is no rule that says a player cannot protest. None.
Yes, and 99% of the players are following that because they
Okay.
know what the
Okay. This is real simple, Chris. When you
Yes, break it
say
down.
he hasn't sacrificed anything, that's a lie. He's being whiteballed by the NFL. He has been denied an opportunity to play in the NFL. And I would
That's
think
true.
conservatives and libertarians will find that to be offensive, as opposed to saying, "Well, this is wrong." Final
No,
comment.
what I find offensive and what other conservatives find offensive is that we turn into the NFL on Sunday to get away from politics, from a divided nation, and thrown in front of our faces is a protest that many feel disrespects the flag. I don't have a problem with him
Really?
protesting. I don't have a problem with him doing what he's doing. My point is what I've said many times is just do it on your own time.
So my last comment, since you say
Yes.
we turn to the NFL just to watch them play, well, I guess we shouldn't have Breast Cancer Awareness Month in October, or we see pink all over the place. In fact, if we follow that case, then we shouldn't see any politicians walking on the field or sitting in the owner's box, should we?
Who is going to get offended by Pink Breast Cancer Month or what you're talking about?
Hold on, wait a minute. Hold up. But you said no. You said I turn the game on to watch football. I don't want to see any statements. I don't want to see any stuff along those lines. So what does having pink flags and pink cleats got to do with football?
I don't want to see any political statements that can be deemed offensive.
Oh, gotcha. So that you get to decide. That you get to decide, right?
No, the NFL players, the NFL owners decide.
Oh,
They
gotcha.
don't want protests on their at their stadium.
So we shouldn't see.
They don't want
So we shouldn't.
protesting
So we shouldn't have any politicians on the field tossing a coin or sitting in the owner's box, right?
What's the relevancy to that?
Well,
To
hell,
our point.
well, guess what? If Donald Trump is sitting in the box of an owner and I didn't vote for him, I don't want to see him on TV because I want to watch the game. I want to see the action. If Chris Christie is sitting in Jerry Jones' box, I don't want to see him. I want to watch the game. See,
The difference is this, Mr. Martin. When it comes to Donald Trump, you have people that love him and you have people that don't love him.
and more Americans did vote against him than voted for him.
I think that the American flag is a universally respected and loved thing in this country.
Well, actually,
and I think that's far different than a politician who can and cannot be liked.
Well, I'll tell you this here. Every police officer who has brutalized somebody black or brutalized somebody has that flag on their patch. You might want to go look at the hashtag Veterans for Kaepernick.
What the relevancy is? What's the relevancy?
What the relevancy is, they are beating somebody on the color of that flag. And so remember, you mentioned Tommy Smith and John Carlos. I heard the same thing said in 1968. You shouldn't protest. How dare you? It's all about the flag.
When did you hear
Okay.
that? I was born in 1966. When did you
All right,
hear
Chris.
that?
Well, here's the deal. You now know.
When did you hear? Were you alive in 1968?
Actually, I was born in
I
I was born November 14, 1968, and actually, I just saw Tommy Smith on Saturday at the CBC dinner, and I also interviewed
it
John.
sound like
Oh,
you
no,
were there.
one second, and I've also interviewed John Carlos as well. Have you talked to Tommy Smith and John Carlos?
You just sounded like you were there. And
Have you
witnessed it
talked to
live.
Tommy? Well, hell, I wasn't there for the American Revolution, but I damn sure read about it in the book. I mean, my goodness. I mean, I wasn't there for the civil rights movement, but my goodness, I have read all about the King's books, and I know about Emmett Till and Montgomery.
You didn't present it like that. You
Oh,
presented
I'm
like
sorry.
you
You're
were
right.
there.
Okay. I'm sorry. Well, excuse me because I actually read a book.
And you comprehended everything, the history back then at 2 years old. So I know you're a brilliant man. I thought you were even that brilliant.
Okay, but I'm just saying. I mean, but I've actually read a book. Chris, I appreciate it, but Colin Kaepernick is sacrificing, and he's continuing sacrificing, and I'm glad that he's putting it on Front Street because it matters. Chris Arp, thanks a lot. We appreciate it. Go Cowboys? Oh, hell no. You really lost your damn mind because hell, that ain't nothing. Oh, see, now I'm about to really go there because ain't nothing like hashtag hate Cowboys. Okay, so especially with that owner, put your toe on the line. So I just hope y'all lose all other games this year. And so, all right, Chris, thanks a bunch. But that's the last thing you should have said. The hell, you talking about go Cowboys? We're gonna take a break right now. We come back. We're gonna talk about African Americans' housing income with Bill Spriggs, Howard University economist. Back on Roland Martin on the Filter in a moment.
Everything that is was once imagined. Poet Ted Jones.
I got it. All right, folks, I want to introduce our panel right now. We have, of course, Cleo Monago. He is social and political analyst and activist. Also, Angela Peoples, campaign director for the Action Center on Race and Economy. And we also have Bill Spriggs with the AFL-CIO, chief economist, and also Howard University economics professor. There were a lot of headlines last week about record median, that is average household incomes. Of course, the headlines use words like record and rises again. That was good news for some people. But when you break it down to whites and blacks, there's a different story. And for African Americans, the picture is very bleak. 2002, white household income was $64,084. Black average household income was $39,661. By 2017, white household income rose to $68,145. Black average household income rose to $40,259. Now, folks, in 15 years, that's a rise of about $4,000 for white folks and under $600 for black folks. So how can we bridge this gap between black enormous economic power, $1.3 trillion spending power, but then the issue of low black wealth in this environment? Bill, let's turn to you. So explain this. And again, because it's very interesting when folks go, oh, black people, y'all just like everybody else. You're on the same page. And these things have changed. It's been 50 years since Dr. King was killed, and all these enormous changes without realizing that what happened in the previous 350 years impacts where we are today.
Well, wealth is the accumulation of earnings. So when you look at the numbers, there are huge gaps that still remain at the same levels of education. So if you're a white male and you drop out of high school and you're black and you're female, then you need a college degree to get that median income. If you're a black male, you need an associate's degree to get the income of a white high school dropout. So take that gap, accumulate it over the life of your working years, and you get around $1 million different over what a black man would earn versus a white man, a bigger gap for black women. Obviously, at the end of the day, when I die, what I have left to leave behind is going to be different if I had $1 million extra.
And so that has an impact in terms of who's buying houses, and when it comes to whether you're able to pay for your kids' college, whether you're able to pay for their wedding, to allow them to start their life off debt-free as well. And so this thing has just this continuing effect when you look at these numbers.
It's a continuing effect, and those life chances matter. If your parent can help you go to college, you have a much higher share of those children who finish versus those children whose parents don't have the money. But what we have to understand is black families will send their kid to school even when they make a lot less money than a white family. The result, however, is that black people have to borrow money because they don't have the money.
Now we're dealing with debt.
And now it's debt, which takes away from your wealth because you're borrowing, you're spending down your wealth. So these gaps have the implication that even to catch up, you got to fall behind. So this gap that you just saw actually misses one other point. Mm-hmm. If we had gone back just a few more years to 2000, black incomes haven't gotten back to 2000. For median whites, they haven't gotten back to 2000. Whites in the interim between 2002 and 2017 had some gains up before the crash. Then they lost income. We lost a huge amount of income during the crash. And so what is missing is within the story of African Americans not making gains we would like is an America in which very few people are making gains. And so when you look at that bigger time span, you see that only those in the top 10%, only those in the top 10%
and
are
we say
better
top
off.
10%, what are they earning? What is that?
Yeah, so we're talking, you got to be in the $200,000 range.
Gotcha. And the only reason I say that because it's amazing. I see some white folks who make $150,000 who go, okay, but I'm not rich. I'm like, look, if you're making 150 and the person over here making 38, trust me, you're in a hell of a lot better situation than they are.
Oh, you're in a better situation, but understand what I said though. they lost ground too. So, and an economy that's not generating it for anybody but the top 10%, we disproportionately are not in that group, then we're going to fall further behind. And that's what you see in those numbers.
And
there.
that's why for African Americans, the push for folks to get to college, to get into college is so vital because the numbers are so stark. But also, again, trying to get us to be in a situation where we're not so dependent upon those loans and being in debt because you might go. But if you're sitting looking at $75, $100, $120,000 in debt, you're going to be digging out of a bigger hole.
You will. And so that's the damage done by not addressing the deeper set of inequalities. Because even with the college degree, remember what I said, that's a black woman trying to catch up with a white high school dropout.
Right, right.
So it doesn't level the playing field. It just puts us on the playing field. But the playing field is very tilted. We're just at the bottom looking up. So this wealth gap plus this ongoing gap in earnings for people with the same level of education, the unemployment gap for people with the same level of education, just makes it that much more difficult for us.
You talk about gaps, and so I want to transition to this next story, which is pretty interesting, because you have black women who are really putting pressure on the Democratic Party when it comes to these elections. Ayanna Pressley, of course, I met her over the weekend at CBC. She beat the incumbent in Massachusetts by 18 points, and they had a panel at CBC where she was not supported by the Democratic establishment, including the Congressional Black Caucus Political Action Committee. And so what these sisters are saying is we are the backbone of the Democratic Party, and the support needs to be there. Yes, a number of them are running, Angela, but the dollars aren't coming, the support isn't coming, and they're still winning despite not getting that kind of support.
They're still winning, and they are doing it in a way that is turning out the energy and enthusiasm that we saw even back in 2008 and 2012 with President Barack Obama when his first candidacy. And so I think you're seeing candidates like Ayanna Pressley, like Stacey Abrams running as themselves, as black women, as very authentic leaders, and that is what people are responding to. They're winning because people are showing up to volunteer. They're working those long hours despite having the infrastructure from the Democratic Party in a way that we haven't seen before. And I think it's going to be critical for the Democratic Party, not just to show up in the general election, but to see what really happens when folks like Ayanna Pressley come to Washington, D.C.
Right.
That's what I'm really excited about, to see what this shakeup looks like.
Cleo, I had a meeting with the Republican National Committee when Rice Priebus was chair. There was a sister who was in the meeting, and she said, no group hates us more than black women. They said, not even close. Black women despise the Republican Party.
Well, a lot of people who are black despise the Republican Party, both male and female, am I right?
Yeah.
But I have a question for Dr. Spriggs, if I can. You talked about the fact that when white people have a financial cold, black people have a financial flu in terms of the comparison. But I was wondering, and this has to do with who votes and who doesn't vote, like these sisters who didn't have black support or even the Congressional Black Caucus support in terms of mentality. Would it be helpful to black people if we invested in black businesses or invested in black wealth as a community? Because one of the issues that we
Well, first of all, a lot of our candidates also need, like one of the things we've been dealing with is, also money for campaigns.
Yeah.
We're seeing Black Votes Matter. We're seeing others, Adrian Shropshire. We're seeing DeWanna Watson, where they'll rate black people like, yo, we got to fund our, as I keep saying, fund our freedom.
Right. So getting back to my question and also recommendation to the listening audience is that we have these concerns economically, but the dollar comes to our community once and goes to other communities 3 and 4 and 5 up to 30 and 40 times. Is that relevant to this issue of poverty and rich in wealth?
No, it's not. It is a way we might address some gaps, but understand the size of the gap. If you took the 400 richest white people in this country, they have more wealth than the entire black population, plus half the Latinos. So that's the kind of gap that you're talking about. And in the aggregate, that kind of wealth matters because it's that institutional gap that creates politicians, political campaigns, endows universities, gets you the struggle of an Alvin Ailey theater company trying to maintain itself,
Funds our own civil rights organizations.
funds our own organizations. So it is something we should be aware of. We need to have more leaders, but just because a black person owns a company and has their wealth doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be on the same page politically with the group that empowered them.
Absolutely.
That's right.
So I totally get it. It's important, but given the size and the dimension of the problem, it's not viable.
Angela.
Well, and it's also why it should be viewed as a tool, but for building our collective community and our political power ultimately, because we do need institutional changes that are not just going to lift one family or even one community at a time. We actually do have to invest in building that political power.
Got to ask y'all this here. Let's move to our next story, Papa John's. George John Schnatter, the founder, the CEO, he's been ousted, can't even contact the employees. They've removed his name from everything. They're going through a total company makeover. So they've hired Bozoma St. John. Of course, she's the sister who now works for Endeavor, Chief Marketing Officer, to go through this whole corporate rebrand, if you will. And they say they're making substantive changes. A lot of black folks have made it clear they ain't buying your pizza. Some people say the pizza's not good. Others say, no, I'm just saying, no, but other people say it's because of his position when it came to the Affordable Care Act, also him using the N-word and that sort of deal. We saw what happened with Starbucks as well in terms of they shut all their stores down. Do you believe, and Cleo, I'll start with you, that companies can successfully drive a discussion about corporate responsibility and erasing or trying their best to move beyond a person who makes this sort of comment, or just like Waffle House and the issues they actually have as well? Can they do that? And what does it look like?
Well, what does it look like? Well, that's a whole conversation. But to get to your question first, in terms of whether they can do it or not, realistically, I don't think they can. I think they can rebrand themselves and reseduce people into paying attention to their product. But the bottom line is that Papa John is a white supremacist racist. And when people go to there to get pizza from there, they're going to get, I mean, even though his name is over all that, that's a public, that's public. That's for the public, so people can feel like he's not involved. But he still has stock. He still has ownership. He still makes money off of Papa John.
But we're seeing this, Angela. Though I think historically, look at Texaco. You think about Denny's.
Yep.
When you think about even the issue that American Airlines had with Tamika Mallory. When you think, so you have a number of examples of corporations have had issues dealing with race. And they have, Uber, Airbnb, same thing, put a number of things in place. Yeah. Is there a way for us, because also there are some African Americans who own Papa John's franchises. Mm-hmm. So is there a way for us to demand that kind of corporate responsibility, to me, that goes beyond buying a table at a civil rights dinner?
I think that's absolutely what you're seeing is that this push for corporate responsibility is being driven by people, is being driven by activism. We're seeing a lot of it happen online, on social media, on Twitter. There is often, a lot of after the issue happened at Starbucks in Philadelphia, there was a huge push online, and that's really what I think sparked that change. So I don't think that corporations are leading. I think that corporations are doing what they do. They're following right along with their profit models and seeing that, frankly, racism and bigotry is not profitable. And it reminds me of what your guest said earlier, thinking about wanting to just turn on the TV and not have to be engaged with politics. Politics is everywhere. It has been that way. I know a lot of people say this new moment in our culture because of who's the president. I think that's not the case. It's always been this way. Yep. And particularly for people who are black, are queer, are trans, have been minorities, we wear our politics on our sleeves and also in our pocketbooks. And that's what you're seeing corporations respond to.
Bill?
Well, we have the ability to impact them, and they do listen. So we must always use that power. And we can't forget that we have collective wealth. It's in our culture. Mm. Even when we celebrate an Aretha Franklin, she came out of our culture. She is benefiting from a culture that we created that's very marketable. We have resources. We shouldn't act like we don't. We have to marshal them, and we have to be careful about how we use them and our image. Black women are not only doing it when it comes to politics, But this recovery, the re-entry of black women into the labor force has been at a much higher rate than for white women. So even though black women have about twice the unemployment rate, they overcome that by a higher level of participation. So a higher share of black women are working than white women.
And we've also seen higher trends of black women entrepreneurship as well, correct?
That's increasing. It's from a smaller base, but I love this grassroots involvement, overcoming barriers,
Right.
and not paying attention to the barriers. It shows. And that kind of energy is what's the politicians
But I just want to
ignoring.
interject real quickly, Roland.
Real quick.
There's a difference between CYA and transformation.
Right, right. And what I'm saying is, when one of these things happens, I think our job is well, not just our job, but say, no. We don't want to just say, buy a couple of tables
Right.
for the Little League. We want to see, yes, transformation, top to bottom, minority supplier development, who's on your boards, your employees. If you're Papa John's, how many franchise do you have? And what are you offering? It's a question of equity, allowing them to be able to have loans from the company. But my whole deal is, look, they know they have a problem. And it has to be wide and robust, and not just, we gave some money to the UNCF, to the Urban League, the NAACP,
Or not
and
just
we're good.
change their
Right.
front-facing image.
Or we
They need
hired
to
a black
change
consultant.
exactly.
We hired a black female
Right.
consultant.
Right.
to look at us.
My point is, I want it has to be robust.
Right.
But even
Final
beyond
comment.
that, even beyond that, what are they doing politically? Are they giving more money
Same
to the
thing.
campaigns that then undercut us?
That's right.
And when you look at where they give politically,
Right.
it swamps what they give to our community.
Of course.
Gotcha.
And
Right.
and what they give politically are to those things that interfere with our right to organize. We're the
That's
most
right.
unionized workers on the planet. They interfere with our right to decent wages.
Right. So again, that's where we look at this thing in a much broader way. And while we're saying no, there are a certain number of things you have to do. We're going to keep that pressure on you until you do those things. And so we'll see what happens with Papa John's. All right, folks, the Emmys taking place tonight on prime time. And when they have the Creative Arts Emmys, a whole bunch of black folks got Emmys. In fact, in all of the guest categories, all African Americans won in those for the first time. Eric Deggans, the television critic for National Public Radio, he's been gearing up all weekend to watch the Emmys. And Eric, what is interesting about the Emmys, we saw, of course, the Oscar So White campaign and so much attention with that. But African Americans have really gotten the level of attention and respect, but also jobs when it comes to television. I told a joke. I played the George Lopez golf tournament for the last 5 or 6 years. And the first 3 or 4 years, it was all kind of black folks in Hollywood who were playing golf. The last couple of years, I'm like, where everybody go? And I went, oh hell, they working. Literally, it was like they were like, say man, I'm on set, I'm here, because after Scandal and How to Get Away with Murder, all of a sudden they start replacing white folks in pilots with black people.
Exactly. We have a record amount of diversity in the new fall TV shows, and I'm very concerned about that. And we're also record amount of diversity in the Emmy Awards. And so even though we had a great showing in the Creative Arts Emmys are kind of the awards that aren't considered important enough to put on network television. So what we're going to see tonight, we're going to see the folks from Blackish up for awards, Anthony Anderson and Tracy Ellis Ross. We're going to see Insecure. Issa Rae is nominated for Best Actress in a Comedy for the first time, even though that show has gotten a lot of love from critics and has been nominated for an Emmy in the past. Now we're seeing her nominated as a performer. We've got Jeffrey Wright and Newton nominated for Westworld. Two actors who have done great work on that show, but haven't necessarily been recognized maybe as much as they should have been. So now, in a lot of these contests, the black folks are not necessarily favored to win. One of the big contests is going to be for Best Comedy. Now, Donald Glover's Atlanta has a real shot at winning that award, but it's up against The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel on Amazon, which is considered kind of a favorite in Hollywood. And so there's going to be a real struggle to see which one of those shows is going to come out on top. And because Donald Glover did so well last year, he made history winning awards for directing comedy, and also as a performer for Atlanta. I'm wondering if the Emmy Academy has it's already been honored, and maybe it's time to move on to Maisel.
Well, and I think, Eric, the bottom line is this here: when you look at so many different networks, and look, now whether some people like it or they don't. Nielsen released their study last week on the black consumer. African Americans watch TV more than anybody else, 52 hours a week. And we're watching a significant amount of television streaming as well. And so the bottom line is we drive viewership with a lot of these different shows, and plus how we operate with social media. Those of us who live tweeted Scandal, some of these other different shows, you look at Power as well. And so these networks are understanding, hey, if we want to see hit shows, we better see black people.
Yeah, and black folks also are an ethnic group where we tend to watch shows where we are featured. And other ethnic groups don't always do that. I think that's one reason why Hispanics are underrepresented in television, because of the differences in language and culture that are in Latino culture. If you're from Guatemala, you may not feel as bonded to somebody who's from Cuba or from Puerto Rico. They don't necessarily flock to a show that's featuring one kind of Latino ethnicity. Whereas if we see black folks in the show, we're probably going to show up and watch it, particularly if it's a star that's really popular in the black community. And that is a really powerful lever, because we're at this point where viewership for network television is going down every year. More and more people are watching streaming, they're watching Netflix, they're watching cable. And so the networks really have to focus on the people who love broadcast television. And as you pointed out, that's black folks. And so there's a little more catering to us. Now, also what we're seeing in the areas of quality television, we look at high-end cable shows and streaming shows, we're seeing that creatively there's a lot of room to give black creators a chance to express themselves. So we're seeing shows like Dear White People, we're seeing Atlanta, we're seeing Insecure with Issa Rae. We're seeing all these great new shows that feel fresh because black folks haven't really had a chance to express themselves creatively on television the way white creators have been able to. So we can see a show like Insecure that's basically about a group of average African-American young people in Los Angeles just trying to get through life. You see that and you don't think, well, I saw that in Friends, or I saw that on some sitcom.
Oh, hell no. You ain't seen black folks in Friends.
Yeah, you haven't really seen that, exactly, because they didn't have black folks on Friends. So it feels fresh, and it is fresh. And so we're getting it from two ends.
Yep.
It makes economic sense to feature black folks on television, but it also makes creative sense to feature black folks on television. And I think that's what we're going to see tonight at the Emmy Awards in terms of people.
All right, Eric Deckers, I know you got to go watch the Emmy Awards, and so we appreciate it, man. Thank you so very much. And, folks, y'all check out Eric Deckers on National Public Radio. Thanks a lot. All right, then. So, yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm concerned that 52% of the market is, in terms of people who watch TV, are black folks.
52 hours a week.
Okay, that's more than everybody's about.
Right. So African Americans are at 52 hours.
Okay.
The next group is at 38 hours. So we're watching 14 more hours a week than the next group.
So we're watching a lot of TV. My question.
A whole lot of TV.
A whole lot of TV. So my question is this: outside of the realm of comedy, and given this increase in black faces on television, how many of these shows feature black people? I'm talking about outside of the realm of comedy, loving each other.
Well, and again, first of all, that's one of the things that I do believe that we are seeing with some of these different shows. He talked about Insecure. He talked about
there's no love story. There's no reliable love story in Insecure.
There's at least one couple that is married and has been married the whole show.
Right,
now they're
right.
having a baby.
Had a shower last night.
They're also very young. Like I think it's.
Well, first of all, they're also single.
It's
so,
reflective of, but you also can't discount the loving friendship relationship that the women on the show have.
Absolutely, but
but we also see it in Greenleaf. We see it in Queen Sugar. We also see it.
This Is Us. There's also a loving family.
This Is Us as well. So here's the piece.
With a white parental backdrop.
Well, I understand your point, Super Black, but but that's your nickname. But again, though, by seeing more African American showrunners, more African Americans who are creating shows, you are seeing that level of emphasis because, look, if you talk about Queen Sugar, the relationship between Vi and Hollywood, again, that's one of those relationships. So you actually are seeing that. But go ahead.
Okay, well,
you want to make some other point? Go ahead.
no, I was going to say is that's my concern. I mean, I'm familiar with Queen
It's
Sugar.
very valid. That's a great point.
And you got to really search to find these love stories. There's not a consistent, reliable, healthy love story narrative in most of television, even though we make up most of the people watching
Gotcha.
television
Andrew.
outside of comedy.
I mean, but to your point, though, it's important to ensure that there's a complexity of views and experiences of Black people on screen as we're getting more Black folks in the creative position. I will
Yep.
say I've been really surprised and grateful to see the acclaim that Atlanta has. That show is Black AF. You know, like it's very, very Black. I don't know. I know we're doing a digital.
Black
so I don't know.
AF?
I don't
Is
know.
that apples
I'm
and-
not sure.
You know
what
damn
type.
well what
I don't know.
AF stands for,
I don't know how
Cleo.
far we go with the language, but it's a really
appalled.
it's a super Black show to
I've
you.
never seen Atlanta.
But it's getting it's I would recommend it. But it's getting so much praise and so much support as is Donald Glover. Lena Waithe is also another new Black creative
Yep.
that I would bring into
Isn't
this
it a rap
conversation.
show, Atlanta?
It is. There
Well,
is a
Atlanta.
rap
Lena
artist
Waithe show
and
is The
there's-
Shy, which is
yes,
on
it's on
Showtime as
Showtime.
well.
Thank you.
Then,
Yes.
of course, you got Power. Then you got
A drug addict show.
Huh?
A drug trafficking show.
Yeah, but he's still with his wife. Okay, but Bill, final
Oh, he
comment.
with his
Bill,
wife.
final
He's with
comment.
a white-looking Latino.
Wait, no spoilers
He
now.
ain't
Hold
with his
on.
wife.
Hold on now.
He don't
No
even touch
spoilers.
his wife. That's what I'm saying. He don't touch his Black wife.
Well, he did in seasons 1, 2, and 3.
For 3
But-
minutes.
But Bill, go ahead.
My final comment is to that man in Mississippi. More U.S. Army men died in the Civil War defending the United States of America than every other war combined. The Revolution, World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam. If you fly the Confederate flag and you're upset at Kaepernick,
Right. Shut the hell up.
thank you.
And we're going to end the show on that. I know we over time. We're going to end the show on that. And so I think Bill Spriggs has taken Cleo Monago's nickname, Super Black.
Black.
Y'all, don't forget to support Roland Martin Unfiltered by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Look, this is the blackest thing out there, okay? And here's a piece. We talked about television. And look, I greatly appreciate the amount of television that we watch. But it's also a matter of what we're putting in our heads. And so my problem is we got all these networks, even black networks, we don't have news shows that talk about the stuff that we have been talking about for the past 1 hour and 10 minutes. And so that's why we created this show. So please support us at RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Don't forget, we restream the show at 10 p.m., 2 a.m., 6 a.m., and then 10 a.m. You can also see it on YouTube, Facebook, and Periscope as well. And so tune in tomorrow, and you'll see which HBCU I'll be rocking tomorrow right here, Roland Martin Unfiltered. I got to go. Holla!